Ladies and gentlemen, in this Red Gaming Nintendo.com video we're going to be discussing game demos. New data suggests that demos actually half game sales, so in other words cut them by 50% compared to games that do not have demos. This was a slide and presentation presented by game designer Jesse Schell, and he made those during the Games Lab conference, which happened in Barcelona this Friday. Anyway, one example that they used was an Xbox 360 games, and they showed that those that were promoted by a release trailer but had no game demo sold on average 525,000 units. On the other hand, titles which contain a demo and a trailer would sell about 250,000. And contrary to all of this, a title that has neither a demo or a trailer will sell about 100,000. You can see the absolutely massive disparity there between the three business models. And back in February, Schell actually gave a presentation during DICE 2013. And he basically said that the games which sell the most are the ones that build on the expectations of the players. But if you give them the opportunity to then test those out during a demo, they probably won't go ahead and buy the game. And he even gave a quote. He said, "You mean we spent all of this money making a demo and getting it out there and it cut our sales in half? Yes, that's exactly what happened to you." End quote. So, game demos have been pretty controversial for a while, and there have been previous studies that pretty much said the same thing. The demos equals less sales. And this is really contrary because back in the day of, especially the early PlayStation, kind of 1990s era, where demo discs were becoming increasingly popular, demos were basically everywhere. I don't think there were magazines of Sega Saturn or Sony PlayStation that didn't actually have a demo disc with them. Everyone was bundling there because it was cool and it sold magazines and so on and so forth. And people were actually really happy to pay a couple of extra pounds, for example, depending on your currency, just to play the latest games and check them out. And indeed, some games would even do like special edition demos, and I believe it was the official magazine in the UK, at least, of the PlayStation, that had a demo disc of Tekken 3, and it had its own case. It was its own jeweled case. All the CD art was printed and everything else, and it looked really awesome. And it was basically like a collector's edition demo. It was pretty cool. But the thing is, recently, people have been accusing companies of there are less demos available now, and it's really true if you think about it. Now, one of the reasons, aside from the sales, obviously, which most games developers and publishers probably had an idea about, but they most likely weren't certain of, and that's cost. It's not like demos are free. It's not like they simply, cut and paste a certain amount of code and that's it. No. Even things such as digital distribution and distributing those demos costs them money. And you've also got to take into account other little problems as well. Like, for example, let's say your game is not amazing. Let's say your game is, it's okay. Right? And generally speaking, you know whether your game falls into this category. Well, sometimes, of course, your game is simply going to put people off. In other words, they're really looking forward to something, and when it comes down to it, all of your cool art, all of your cool trailers, they just don't match up to the gameplay itself. It's that simple. Now, Call of Duty often does do demos, but what they'll do, they'll basically wait several months after the game's released, and then they'll release the demos, which I suppose is pretty smart, because at that point, the initial adopters, those who have played the game, know the game, and so on, they're probably going to have played it to the point where there's not really that much that can surprise them anymore. And then, of course, the demo comes out. Oh, okay, it's rekindling the interest of the game, and maybe you'll spur on sales. Now, when you think about it, it's actually kind of strange, because most people said that, hey, I'd buy this game if there was a demo available. I want to test it out first. Or another common reason that people give is that, I'll pirate less, or I wouldn't pirate games. I just use the pirate to test out the games, and then if I like the games, then I'll buy them. And this is of course true on consoles and PC. I mean, some people say that PC piracy is rampant, and of course it is. But on the other hand, console piracy, it's kind of to the point where if you want to be able to pirate on the consoles, you probably know someone who either can make your console modified, shall we go with, or you could do it yourself. In other words, it's not really that hard. Most of the tools are quite readily available by now. And so, honestly speaking, a lot of the piracy that I see in terms of complaints and so on, a lot of these games are actually available on console first, because of course PC now is really switching towards digital distribution, and disc-based, they're usually in the store up to a week early, and so of course that means piracy is becoming a pretty rampant. And so obviously it is a culmination of many different factors. Now, it's kind of strange that demos, because people always say that, oh, if the game is really good, then, well, I'll go ahead and buy it. And that's not necessarily the case. I'll give you a couple of examples. First of all, this is a really unprecedented. I don't think it's happened before, maybe, or since rather, but maybe it has. I obviously can't tell you for every single demo ever, but there was, back in the days of the Sega CD, also known of course as the Mega CD, depending on the region of the world you are from, there was a title available called Kiko's Flying Air Squadron. And this game was, believe it or not, a demo on a magazine disc, but the actual demo, if you put in a cheat for the level skip, you could actually play the entire sodding game. And I was really young at the time, of course, but I was playing this demo, and I got to the end of the demo, and I was just like, huh. And then I happened to notice in the very same magazine of the one that gave me the demo, I happened to notice there was a level skip cheat in there, and I was, young, and I was like, well, I wonder what happens if I put the cheat in. I just wondered if it would go to the very end of the demo screen or whatever, or I don't know, cause an implosion of the space-time continuum. And so I just put the cheat in, not really expecting much, just did it. And what happened? That's right, the next level showed up. And of course, I was giddy with glee, because, well, that gave me basically a free game. I was like, thank you very much, magazine. And it was actually kind of ironic, because in one or two issues, well, not ironic, but one or two issues later, they actually gave an oopsie, and they said, yeah, that was an accident. Basically what happened is the developers or publishers, whoever put the demo together, they basically just didn't take out the rest of the game, and they just put it in like an end point. So they basically said, yeah, when this point happens, go to this screen, and that was it. Unfortunately, if you put in the level skip cheat, they didn't think to take those cheats out, and so, yeah. And so they retrospectively, the magazine, claimed credit for it and said, well, there you go, free game. So I don't exactly know who got the blame for that. No doubt someone got their knuckles rapped, because I'm pretty sure that someone out there was fired over that. I'm pretty sure someone out there probably got beaten with a proverbial stick, because obviously that was not a very good thing for the company. However, there have been other issues where I've actually downloaded demos of games and played games, and I'll be honest, I just haven't bought the bloody thing after I've gotten the game, after I've got the demo. There was a really, really fantastic example of this back in the PlayStation 1, where I would play Destruction Derby 2, I think it was, and I really wanted to buy the full game. And I really loved the demo. I honestly did. It was ridiculous how much I loved this demo. And I really wanted the game. I played the demo. I really loved the demo. But every time I went to the store, I thought, I'm having so much fun with the demo. It was an entire track, no time limited. And indeed, when friends came round, what would we do? Rather than actually racing and trying to do anything so the demo ended, we'd come up with these our own little mini-game ideas. So, for example, it would be something like, trash your car as absolutely much as possible, but make sure it can still run. Or, conversely, trash everyone else's car to the point where you are the only one running, or see how many you could trash, so forth. So it was basically to the point where you had like one wheel that was somehow pulling you around this track, and like you were racing rather than against like 19 or whatever other opponents, you're now racing against like 3 because you managed to basically demolish everything else. And sorry guys, that was my phone. Hang on, let me just mute that. That isn't to say that demos have never ever influenced my decision. A couple of times, yes, it has spurred me on to buying the game. Well, eventually anyway, but the point being that a lot of the time it's just confirmed the fact that I actually want the game. Rather than actually, for example, the Tekken demo that I mentioned earlier, it's just confirmed that yes, this game is awesome and I will buy it. On the other hand, to be honest, I would have bought it anyway. For example, The Last of Us. Now, obviously that game is phenomenal, at least in my opinion, and of course in the opinions of many others. And there was a demo available as kind of an incentive to get God of War Ascension. And Naughty Dog have basically stated that there is no way they're going to release that demo outside of God of War Ascension. So in short, if you don't own the game, you're not going to play The Last of Us unless you buy it. So I never actually bought God of War Ascension, and honestly speaking, I just, I want to get God of War Ascension at some point, I must confess, but aside from that, I have no care for the demo. I want to experience the full thing from the beginning to the end, because that's kind of how The Last of Us is. You don't really want to get halfway through the story and then start playing from there, because oftentimes when games do that, everything's completely out of context. You have no idea really what's going on. It just throws you into the deep end. I often think that games as well have very difficult jobs in giving demos. Like some games, it's pretty easy to give away demos for. FPS games, especially story-driven ones, it's not too bad. Even survival horror, in some respects, you could do alright. Like, for example, they could put, time restrictions on the survival horror demo. And they've done that in a couple of games, for example, Resident Evil. Oftentimes, however, demos, they're hit and miss. Now, that is to say, demos I would like more of in some respects, because, yes, it's nice to be able to try out a game, because, well, otherwise you're basically at the mercy of a trailer and other people's opinions, and that's one of the reasons that I do first impressions. Sometimes I do a full review, or follow-ups. For example, I did that with The Last of Us. I gave an initial, basically I put the disc in, I set up the recording stuff, started recording, and that was it. So you saw the game from the beginning, I was experiencing the game as you would, and I gave my impressions. And obviously, my impressions initially are going to be different from what they will be, say, 6 hours in, okay? But generally, for the first impressions, you can get an idea, is this game a quality game? Right, that's the important thing. Does it have a good quality feel to it? Does it feel that it plays well? Does it feel that it has a good storyline? Does it feel that it has high production value? Is the voice acting good? Are the graphics good? Is the frame rate stable? Dozens of other different criteria. You can get a sense of that, right? You can't see, say, how the power-up tree works, because let's say you were to play a game like, Diablo 3, or say Final Fantasy title from the beginning. You can't really get a handle on how that is going to play towards the end in terms of balance and so forth, because you've unlocked nothing. But on the other hand, you can get an idea of, yes, this is a good game. Of course, companies want to make money, and they want to advertise their game and produce as much hype as they can to do that. And from my perspective as a gamer, yes, I would like to try out more demos, because, well, it just is better for me. It gives me a better indication of whether I like the gameplay or not. However, some games, in my opinion, definitely do benefit more from having a demo than not. Some games just don't really work as well with a trailer, in my opinion anyway, as what they do for actual real gameplay. I'll give you one really obvious example, at least in my opinion, and that would be Amnesia: The Dark Descent. I think that's one of those games where, because obviously the graphics were more primitive than its follow-up, Machine for Pigs, it didn't look bad or anything like that, and trailers do look pretty cool. But when you're playing the game, it's the atmosphere of the title that really works, and the demo really conveys that. And I wouldn't be surprised if the demo did actually have a positive impact from that perspective. As for trailers themselves, well, just how accurate can they be? We all know that companies have a history of just choosing and cherry-picking at the very best, or sometimes not even showing gameplay at all, or maybe just the tiniest little snippets intermixed with so much CG that you're not sure whether you're watching a Disney Pixar movie or whether you're waiting for the new games to come out. Of course, that's not necessarily the same if you've got games that have, say, in-game engine cutscenes. That's also bad, but even then, it doesn't show you anything of the actual gameplay itself, which is a really, really, really big deal. I'm fairly sure that the industry themselves are going to be doing a lot more analysis on these numbers and just seeing how they interact. As I said, it's a case where the big games haven't really been taken into account, and oftentimes big games, like, as I said, The Last of Us, just simply, it doesn't really have a demo that is readily available. And I don't really think it hurts their sales figures, if I'm honest. I don't think I've met anyone that said, oh, you know what, Bioshock Infinite, or, you know, Resident Evil 6, or whatever game, doesn't have a demo available, and therefore I'm not going to play it. Now, this is kind of contrary to, say, how MMOs work. MMOs like, say, World of Warcraft, they actually go a very different route. They actually do give you a demo. But you've got to remember that these games are extremely social. And they do put in a time limits. Like, for example, they'll either give you a week or 10 days or whatever as a trial. Or, for example, in the case of, say, World of Warcraft, they'll say, well, you could get up to this level of your class. Now, if you choose not to ever bother to go beyond that level, or you decide to stay at that level indefinitely, I suppose you could continue to quest, theoretically, forever. But of course, you would be eventually powerful enough to do anything else in the world, and obviously you can't raid or whatever at level 20. That's just impossible. And that's a pretty good model for them, because it basically is enough to get people hooked, which is very important. Other titles like Diablo 3, on the other hand, are a little bit different. Diablo 3, I've actually got a demo trial account at the moment. I haven't actually completed it yet. I think actually I might be really close to the final level, and I was getting to the level restriction. But it hasn't actually. I'm still on the fence of whether to get the game. Why? I've played the demo, I hear you cry. Well, it's a case of I know the game's really good, but a lot of the concerns I have with the game, in other words, the end game, the demo doesn't actually show me. So, I mean, I've heard various mixed things. Some people absolutely love Diablo 3. Other people hate it. Other people say you should play alternatives. And of course, there are some out there. But the problem is, the demo itself I really like, but these concerns I've got, and let's face it, okay, the game's like £29 or whatever it is, depending where you buy it from. And, okay, it's not that much money to spend, it's only a game after all, but the thing is, why buy a game if you end up not liking it? That's the big problem. And I think that's why a lot of people just end up not purchasing the title. So I guess this brings up the question, do game demos really help most of the time for you to make a decision? I think, as I said, sometimes they do, but I think the cases they don't are much more numerous than when they do actually help. And as I said, I believe that industry analysts are going to be doing heavy contemplation of this over the next couple of years, because obviously it's a really big deal. Games are costing a lot more now to produce, and if they can get, say, 10% more sales, or 5% more sales, even going down one particular route, you can bet your bottom dollar that that's the way they're going to go with things. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this particular video. I'm going to get going, so take care and bye for now.